The other example is the grand disaster of 3 Mile Island. The first grand disaster with 0 dead, 0 injured, 0 diseased, nothing in the way of health. After 4 incredible errors piled up, some mechanical, some just human incompetence, damage was done of the order of $250 million. The energy that got out of control was that vast that it did damage several $100 million without taking a single life. That would be an event for celebration in a rational society. Much less energy when it gets out of control in any other form always injures, always kills. Why not at 3 Mile Island? Because you had the defense in depth, you had the containment building. Even if there had been a meltdown, it would have been contained. Anybody who thinks I'm merely a propagandist need merely look at the Kemeny report, a commission which got a mandate on the understanding that the thing was a disaster, and to describe it, a commission which had several fanatically anti-nuclear members, such as Russell Peterson. That commission found that health effects beyond the stress that the population endured, and which of course was entirely due to the brainwashing by the media, that except for this stress, any health effects were utterly negligible. They further stated that even if a meltdown had taken place, that the containment building would have contained it. Why? I don't have time for this. It's described in some of my writings. But that is not the only reason. The other reason is that of all accidents with vast amounts of energy, only a nuclear accident takes place very slowly. It takes hours and hours for the fuel, if it does melt, to melt through the pressure vessel. It takes hours and hours to see what it will do to the concrete floor, and the fact is that you can find nobody in the nuclear industry who will say it'll do anything. All the assumptions are highly pessimistic, down to 100 feet or more, how far the fuel will melt before it must solidify by the laws of physics. But we have evidence of what happens in a case like that, apart from computer simulations, apart from calculations. In the 1950s, it happened several times that a heat of steel got out of the ladle. There were ladle failures, and 150 tons of molten steel spilled onto the concrete floor. How far did it melt toward China in the China syndrome? About half an inch to 1 inch. I don't want to mislead you, because molten steel cools, whereas molten fuel is itself a source of heat. Nevertheless, if you multiply this by a factor of 10 or even 100, what do you get? Not a China syndrome. While the 3 Mile Island episode was in progress, and there were experts from the nuclear industry there, one such team that was flown in had the Ralph Nader-like task of thinking up what if. And they said, what if the pump fails? And we got the other pump from the B loop. What if that fails? We got the emergency core cooling supply, which was never damaged. It was turned off by mistake, that's all. What if that fails too? What if the entire power fails? We got a standby diesel generator. What if that fails? We better fly in another standby diesel generator, and they did. How do you do this kind of thing when a dam bursts. Here in California, where Jerry Brownout knocks nuclear power and has the worst dam in all of the United States, used for hydroelectricity, which can have dreadful casualties if it should fail. Will it fail? Presumably not until the next earthquake. Which reminds me of Diablo Canyon, the propaganda against nuclear plants. The only type of power plant that can be protected against earthquakes. Not completely, nothing is perfect, but the only one that can be protected at all to a very high degree is a nuclear plant. By siting, you don't have to go to where the river is as you do with a dam. By meeting the specifications, which are very tough in all countries. Japan had an earthquake hitting 6 nuclear plants at one time. Not one of them even missed a beat. So nuclear power is safe because the danger is concentrated, because an accident is slow, because there's a defense in depth, which no other source of energy can possibly have. When a dam breaks, there are no evacuations. There's no 17th reserve dam. You don't have 3 days to decide whether to evacuate or not. And yet, nuclear power is being knocked. Now, I would like to go over to another point what we are being offered instead. But before I leave that point, I would like to point out that this moral aspect of nuclear power, that it saves lives, that it has the least price in human suffering, is something that I believe will affect the misled followers. I have no hopes of converting Ralph Nader or Amory Lovins or any of these other clowns. But the followers include 2 big constituencies, the young and women. Why the young? I believe because many of them feel that it's moral to be against something that is dangerous and is run only for profits and that kind of thing. If it is explained to them that if you want to be moral, you're on the wrong side, you should be supporting nuclear power and not opposing it, I believe we can gain large sections of them. The other constituency of anti-nuclear followers are women. Why? They always ask you why. It's a fact, it's been shown in polls that women are far more anti-nuclear, bigger percentage than men. And they lure you into the trap. They expect you to say, well, that's because women are more stupid, because they're more gullible, because they're uneducated, and so on. Nothing of the kind, of course. I don't know the full reasons, but I know one reason, and that is Ralph Nader and company have been brainwashing them much harder. If you look into the issues of Ms. and Red Book and Ladies' Home Journal, it's always full of Ralph Nader. I have seen no articles of his in Field and Stream, Guns and Ammunition, and so on. I believe that among women, again, it can be explained what radioactivity is, that they are radioactive, all of them, just like men are. They all have potassium-40 in their blood. With a half-life, you'll make you shudder, of 1.2 billion years. Explain to them that energy conservation without good ventilation, and much of energy conservation consists in reducing ventilation, introduces radioactivity through radon decay from uranium, which is present everywhere, particularly in building materials, can expose you to as much as 1,000 millirems per year, a fact that the EPA is trying very hard to brush under the carpet by all kinds of tricks. Explain the technical facts to that. And I believe that women, most of whom are still interested mainly in their children, in their family, will rather learn about radioactivity, a natural phenomenon, than to have their children die in a war over energy. Now, what are we told we should use instead? We are told that we should use solar energy and its derivatives like wind, biomass, wave power, and so on. Now, solar energy is a good thing and should be used. In fact, there you have one difference. I have never met any nuclear proponent who is opposed to solar energy. I have met tons and tons of solar proponents who are not so much pro-solar as they're anti-nuclear. What I am opposed to is hoaxing people by telling them that solar energy can take over from fossil fuels and nuclear. It can't. And it never will be able to. Why can I say such a thing with confidence? Because I confidently believe that the sun, which now gives 1 kilowatt per square meter at the best of times input, 100 years from now will give the same amount. In fact, if I wanted to quibble, I would say it will give just a little less, because the sun, of course, is a nuclear reactor and the fuel is decaying, is being used up. But don't worry, we've got another 500 billion years to go. In any case, what does it mean, this diluteness of power? It is very useful for space heating, for heating water, for the solar dryer, which has been known to generations, a piece of string attached between two hooks. All of these are highly welcome as supplements, but it can never be a substitute, and here's why not. Because solar energy, when used efficiently, is used in the way man usually uses nature. He lets nature do the work and then comes in and taps the result. He lets nature concentrate solar energy, either in time, over hundreds of millions of years to form fossil fuels, or in space, by letting nature lift up billions of tons of water and letting it collect it into a river and then damming it, and there at that point he comes in and taps it.